Okay, welcome back to the speeder bike build. In the last video, we got the handlebars pretty much done. There's still a little bit of work to do, but for the most part, they're done. Next thing I want to work on is the instrument panel here. And so the first thing I did was I cut out a paper template that fits the hole. And so now I can transfer that to a piece of aluminum. And I just happen to have this aluminum plate that was scrap from something. And that fits in there, missing all the holes. So I'm just going to scribe that on there. Now, before I cut that shape out, what I want to do, if you take a look at this, there's little, there's spots for little handles, but they look like tracks that the handles could slide up and down in or back and forth. And you look at reference photos and it looks like handles that can slide up and down, kind of like shifters, kind of. So I want to mill in all of those channels, plus the holes for the other details and stuff. And I figured it would be easier to mill those channels if I could hold that part in the lathe perfectly square. And if I cut it out, it doesn't really have a square edge. So I'm going to put that in the mill. Well, I'm going to lay it out first. I'm going to lay out the design, lay out all the little channels, and I'll clamp that in the mill just like that so I can hold it while I mill that out. The vise jaws don't open that wide, so what I might do is just cut it down until it'll fit, but keep it square. That way I can clamp that square while I mill out all the little channels and features. Then I'll cut out the shape. So that's the plan. I'll get back to you once I got some more to show you. Okay, here's that laid out, and it's partly measured and partly eyeballed, and I basically just transferred that onto the aluminum plate. According to the scale, the slots should be about 3 millimeters wide. And I have a 2 something millimeter end mill in the milling machine. So I'm just going to eyeball to the line, like eyeball center on the line, and plunge in and go. And then I'm going to shift over left or right to make it the 3 millimeters. Now the angled ones are at a 45-degree angle, so I'll do all the straight up and down ones and back and forth ones first. Then I'll have to re-clamp this at a 45-degree angle to get those other details there. All right, that particular end mill doesn't look the best, but we'll see how it goes. I do have a smaller one that I'd rather not use, but if I have to, I'll switch it out. So basically, once I make the pass, I'll shift back and forth that much, and that should make it a 3 millimeter wide slot. It's not too bad. I'll have to clean it up with some files, but I think you get the idea. I'm not going to make you watch me do all of the others, but when it comes time to do the angled ones, I'll just show you how I have it clamped in there. But yeah, let me get the rest of that done. We'll get back with you here in a minute. Okay, so I've got the plate rotated 45 degrees, and I've got it clamped down. So now I'll just do here, and that one, and then I'll have to clean all those up with some files, and then those slots will be done. So I'll just show you what they look like when the slots are done. All right, there's what those are looking like, all filed and sanded smooth. I think they came out pretty good. Happy with those. Now on the model, you cut out the 4 little handles and just glue them into the holes. Well, obviously on mine, I want them to actually move and slide. Now I looked at some reference photos, and some of them have 4 handles, some have 5 handles, or knobs, whatever you want to call them. Some photos, the knobs are nice and smooth. Other photos, they have like 4 ribs around them. And I'm still deciding how I want to make mine. So as far as making them slide in here, well, I need something on the backside for them to kind of slide on, if that makes any sense. And I think it does. Because I can't just put the thing in there, it'll be all flopping around loose. So I need something for it to slide on. I have some ideas, but I'll just have to kind of experiment with it. So I'm just going to make, I think I'm just going to make like a rail here and here with some tracks along those. And then each knob will go on the track. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not. Let me play around with making some parts and I'll come back to you when I got something to show you. Okay, so I cut out some brass tube that would fit in the slot. And actually, it didn't fit. I had to file it down to fit. This was the closest I had. It was like 3.2 millimeter. And I had to file it down to just under 3 millimeter. But anyways, that will get soldered onto a piece like that. And I'll make 4 of those. And so what that'll allow me to do then, if we take a look at the back side of this, now this is just mock-up so far. Obviously that will have to get cut different. But anyways, so I've got that T-piece of those 2 parts soldered together going over top of another rod, just held in with some aluminum blocks. And so that will allow me to then move that up and down and over, if that will focus. Now I'll make the little knobs so they fit inside of the hole, but you can pull that over, pull it back, push it up, and back into the slot there. So far, that one is working pretty well. So I'm happy with that one. Again, it needs a little bit more, but that's the basic operation. Obviously, that's in the way of those 2, so yeah, I'm going to have to cut that. I'm going to have to do something different for these. Not sure exactly. I might have the sliding rod pivot somehow, especially this one. Not really sure yet how I'm going to do that. So this one was the easy one. So I did the easy one first. But that's the idea anyways. So let me get the rest of these done and I'll show you what it looks like once those are working. Okay, here's what this is looking like so far. And I still need to make the knobs that go on there. But just to give you an idea of how these work, this one just slides back and forth up and down that way and can flip over into here. This one, well, back and forth that way. That one's a little bit tight back in here. I might need to file the slot a little bit, but that's how that one's moving. This one, up and back. So you can put it all the way up to there. And again, it's a little bit tight in places, but it works. And then this one, you can bring like that. So if we take a look at the back side, see how it works. The first one on the far left here, that one, that's just straight up and down and it just flips back and forth there. Same thing with the other one, next one over. It just goes back and forth and flips over that way. The other 2, I couldn't quite do that with. On the other 2, that rod pivots here and the other rod pivots there. So as this goes up and down this way, it has to be able to swing over like that. And then it can just flip over into the little slot right there. So, I mean, it works. Not this isn't the most beautifulest looking thing I've ever made, but it works. And then the last one, the little short one here, that just goes back and forth like that. That doesn't have to swing that much. Kind of hard to see that one. But that's all. So, and then this piece right here, that just keeps that end from wanting to come back, because that long rod's only really supported at that end where it pivots. And that basically just keeps it from springing out. And this one is short enough, didn't really have to worry about that. Plus, it's right under this one, so that one will keep it from wanting to come up. But something else I want to do, I don't want to be able to see down inside of there. I mean, it's kind of cool to see the rods, but that would not be realistic for anything, because you don't want to get dirt or stuff down into the mechanism. So what I want to do is I'll take all these rods out. I also need to figure out a way to keep them in. I mean, I could just glue them, but I want to be able to take it apart later, so I might drill in for a little cotter pin to hold them in place. Obviously, those two are screwed, so just this one and this one would need to be drilled for a cotter pin. But anyway, so I'm going to take those rods out, and I'm going to glue some leather on the back side. And that might be a little too thick here for that leather to behave right, I guess. So I might take that down a millimeter. This material is a little over 1.5 millimeter. So I might take it down half that, maybe 3/4 millimeter, just to make it just, not the whole thing, just around the slots. So when I glue the leather in, the surface of the leather will be closer to the surface of this. That way there won't be such a big gap down where the leather is. That's kind of the thought. That also might help some of these move a little bit better, maybe. I don't know. Plus, I'll put some white lithium grease on the slides when it's all finalized. So yeah, I'm going to take the rods out, and then I'll go through, and I'll try a piece of leather before I thin it down, just to see how it looks. But anyways, this is what the mechanism looks like, and I probably could have done things different, but I don't know, it works. And plus, the thing is, nobody's going to be like playing with this thing. You're going to move it a little bit just to say that, yeah, it does move. But other than that, you're just going to put them in a position and leave them wherever you want them. But it's kind of one of those things where if you make playable features on a static display model, people are going to play with it. And then the more people play with it, the more likely is something might break. So I'm always on the fence about making playable features on static display models. But I couldn't not have those move. So that's what I came up with. I think it's okay. I think it's cool. So yeah, let me take those off, and because I still need to clean things up a little bit too. But let me take those off, and then I'll see if I can see what the leather looks like. Okay, so I just used an end mill, and I took down about half the thickness, just around where the slots are. Obviously, I removed the tab across the top there. That'll go back on later. And so now that allows me to take the piece of leather. I just have tape on it because I made the tape template. But that sits in there now. Obviously, the tape will come off. But that just looks a whole lot better. There's a lot less of a thickness of an edge than there was before I did that. So I think that'll make the leather work and look nicer. Obviously, after the leather is glued in, I need to cut slots in it. And so that way, when the handle moves back and forth, the leather will move out of the way of the handle, but then hopefully close back up so you can't see down in there. And that'll, functionally keep dirt and crap out of it and look a little bit more realistic. So that's the plan. So now all I got to do is take the tape off and glue the leather in. Before I get too carried away with that, I want to go ahead and make the other details, because there are some other little switches and buttons and knobs and stuff. So I'm just going to lay that out. And I also need to make the knobs that go there. I still need to think of a design I want for that. But yeah, let me lay these out and get some stuff drilled and mounted to simulate the other knobs and switches. Okay, I didn't realize how many parts have to go into this. And as you can see, I went ahead and drilled out a whole bunch of holes. And all of those around there. Looking at reference photos, it's hard to tell if they're rivets or screws or bolts, but I've got a whole bunch of these little screws left over from the Poker Mercedes builds. So I'm just going to put all of those in there. Now these are just decorative, so they'll get bonded in and cut off flush on the back side. And I think that'll be good for those. For those 3 holes, I'll drill those out a little bit bigger. Looking at the kit, that's for those 3 right there. Looking at reference photos, they either look like buttons or lights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill them out to fit an LED from the back side, and I got that little metal collar that'll press down over top, so it'll make like a little bezel around it. That's not down all the way, but that'll go down more. So I'll have those 3 of those along here. For the larger button here, and again, you can't really tell if it's a button or just a light, but it's red with a bezel around it. And I don't have anything that size because it's 16 millimeters in diameter is what it needs to be. But I popped that out of a toggle switch, and that's big enough I can cut a circle out of that. And then I'll just make a bezel out of a piece of aluminum. And this is just a scrap piece, but I'll turn down a round collar to go over top of that. And so that'll make that button. For the top, right up there, looks like a little switch. And looking at other photos, the switch appears to have like a guard or something around it like that. And now I just cut that out of a piece of copper, and I milled in some grooves to solder in some copper wire. That way I can drill some holes in there and bond that in. And so that'll go behind the switch. I don't know if I like it better like that or like that, with those things facing forward. I think maybe I like it like that. But so anyways, that's the parts for the switch. So I need to drill a hole here, and that switch will just come in, and I'll just have it flush with that, so you only see the switch part sticking up. And then right here and here, there's a couple of little things that are like curved. Hard to say if they're levers or indicators or whatever they are. So for those, and again, one will go here, one will go up here. For those, I cut out a piece of copper and filed it to an appropriate shape, and then soldered on a piece of brass to go around it. And so once you clean that up, there's what that looks like. There's one all cleaned up. And of course, there's a hole in it for an 080 bolt. And so that will go about there. And then, of course, another one will go up about like that somewhere. And those will just get JB welded in place. So 2 of those. And then finally, right there, 2 little, looks like push buttons. And for those, I cut out a square tube of brass, filed a notch in it to look like reference photos, soldered in just a round piece of pipe there, so that way, when I drill a hole here and here, I can just bond that in. I'll just drill a hole the size of the round pipe. One will go there, and the other one will go beside it, and then I'll cut out a piece of the red material, same thing I used for that, cut out a piece of the red material into a square, and glue into the middle of that, so it looks like a red, kind of a guarded push button. So those are the parts. I still need to drill some holes to mount stuff. I need to finish up the parts. And last but not least are the little handles. I need to make 4 of these. Now in the kit, they go in like that. And they're a lot taller than I thought they would be. They stick up a little taller than I expected. But taking the measurements, I drew it bigger so I can, see it better. That's about the actual size. So largest diameter is about 8.5. I'll round it up to 8.5. It really doesn't matter. And also, looking at reference photos, it looks like there are, so if you continue that along here, It looks like there are some details that come up and this way. Probably 4 of them. So I want to add those as well. So that's the plan. I don't know how I'm going to do those yet. I'll probably just cross drill and solder in a smaller piece of brass or something. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And of course, what I'll do is I'll drill in here for a thread or a pin or a rod that will then go into there. So that's the plan. We'll see how it goes. So let me get some parts made and we'll come back to you here in a little bit. All right, so as you can see, I've got that cut out. It doesn't quite fit yet. It's still just a little bit big. I still need to file just a little bit more. But before it will go there, the block here and here are interfering with the ledge right there. So I'm going to have to cut some of that ledge out to clear those, and then I can finalize fitting that in place. But it is it's pretty close. I just need to take off a tiny bit more. I'll get back to that later. For now, let's just kind of take a look what else is going on here. I've got the hole there for the switch, and I've got the holes for the other little pieces. So the bolt that'll hold that in. And I've got that hole cut out for that piece. That's the big red button. And there's what that's looking like. I've got that bezel turned down with aluminum. That button's just a nice press fit into there. And it's a little bit loose, but I didn't have the right size drill bit, but that'll get bonded in. And also, I drilled it open so I can put an LED in there, so I can have that lit up as well. And then for the little levers, I think you've seen everything else. For the little levers, these aren't exact the way they look in reference photos. When you look at reference photos, there's 4 little kind of raised peaks or 4 ridges or ribs around the perimeter. And I had some ideas about how to cut a channel and solder a piece in and turn it to shape. But nothing I had, or none of the ideas, I don't know, they just didn't really... There was too much problem for it turning out looking like crap, I think. Plus, I didn't have the right size end mill to cut the slots I needed. And I was just having a hard time figuring out how to do it. So instead, I turned a groove here, which is like photos I've seen. And I just went in with an end mill and I came down in 4 places just to give some detail. So it's not exact per reference photos, but it is keeping in the same spirit of the overall look of it. Keep in mind, I'm not going for screen accuracy, and I'm adding my own artistic interpretation to it for one reason, because I do plan on selling this when it's done. And if I claim it to be screen accurate, I think that could cause problems. So it's definitely not going to be screen accurate. This is a Star Wars inspired build. In fact, I should probably put that on the title of the videos. But anyways, so, and then that piece there, I mean, you can see what it is, just a piece of brass turned, drilled, and pressed in place. Now for the finish on these, what I would like to do is I want to try something that I haven't done a lot of. I want to try to blacken them. Let me show you what that looks like. This is called Blacken It for brass and copper. It says not for aluminum or stainless. So again, I haven't used this a whole lot, but I think this will give me the surface finish that I want. I think it's just creating an oxide layer, I think. I don't know. I think it's looking pretty good. And I'll buff it with some Scotch-Brite just to take off the high points to make it look like it's been handled and used and worn a bit. I don't know if swishing it actually does anything at all, but, you know. That's looking pretty good, I think. Let me rinse it off in some water and then clean it with some alcohol and buff it with some Scotch-Brite, see what it looks like. So apparently I'm out of Scotch-Brite, but I've got some 600 grit sanding sponge. So I'm thinking if I just gently go over the high spots, I mean, that looks pretty good. I think I like that. So that's how I'm going to do the other 4 handles. Also, one other thing. I did turn those down. I did make those originally to the scale, but they just looked way too big. They, plus where they were, the ends would hit each other when you went to move them. So I had to take the diameter down quite a bit, and I shortened them a couple of millimeters. So I think they look a whole lot better, because the way they were, they just looked definitely just way too big. So anyways, I'm rambling. So I'm going to finish those 3 the same way as that and get this to fit there. And I was thinking about just JB welding all of that in place, but because I didn't want screw heads on this side, but I could use countersunk screws. I can drill in with some small countersunk screws to lock those in so there's no way they're ever coming out, and then fill over top of them and sand them smooth and you never see them. So that's what I'm going to do. Oh, by the way, I also got the holes there for the switches. Here's one of those switches. At least I'm assuming they're switches. So one goes there, and I've got the little red plastic piece that'll go in there. It's all crooked now because I can't see what I'm doing. But yeah, those are also ready to go. So anyways, like I've been rambling on about, I'm just going to clean this up and finalize it. I got to put the leather in still. Paint everything and assemble everything, and then this should be done. So a lot of parts to this, a lot of little pieces to this, a lot more than I thought. So yeah, I'll come back to you once this is looking more like something to look at. Okay, so here it is all assembled. We've got the little switch here, and I basically turned down out of brass a little knob to go there to kind of be similar to the others. I've got the things bonded on, the switches, the LEDs, and these things do move, and but they're not as nicely moving as I was hoping they were going to be, and they're a little bit, I don't know. You can get them to go, but they're just not very smooth. I did put some oil on the shafts, hoping that would make it better, but it doesn't. It kind of made it worse. So I might try some white lithium grease just to see if that helps. And, you know, because I was kind of hoping that it'd feel like, I don't know, gliding through the gears of a nice Italian sports car. Instead, it kind of feels like you're grinding through the gears of an old farm truck. And I do know what both of those feel like. You know, I grew up on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, and my sister's first car was a Fiat X19. So there you go. Now, as far as the details here, those are some bolts that I just had in a little scrounge bin. And I think they were left over from a Poker Mercedes build, maybe. They're just glued in place. Those are rivets and just glued in place. And then these are screws that are just glued in place and cut flush on the back side. Notice that hole, that one, and that one are still open because I'm going to use those 3 holes to actually screw it down into the model. So this will be held in place by those 3 screws. That's, again, why there's nothing there now. But you can see I've got the bezel with the red lens here, the 3 LEDs, And the little push buttons, I guess, are supposed to be push buttons. And the leather on here, you know, it's not doing exactly what I was hoping it would do, because it doesn't close back up very well behind it. And I've got some ideas on what to do about that. Whether those ideas work or not, I don't know. I'll do that later. I'm kind of tired of playing with this thing. This has taken a lot out of me. It doesn't look like much, but there's a lot of just small little parts builds. I think there's over like 100 individual pieces just in this. But yeah, I need a break from this for a while. Now, as far as the LEDs go here, I do scrounge and save parts. I have a little junk drawer bin of random LEDs that I've scavenged over the years. And so when I made those, I just grabbed 3 random LEDs and put them in there. And I didn't really have a thought of making them light up until more recently. And so I basically wired that switch up to the LEDs, and they didn't work. And so, you know, I started with, I want to say I started with a 100 ohm resistor, because you need a current limiting resistor for LEDs. So I started with a 100 ohm resistor. I went down a little bit, I don't know, maybe 75, 80 ohms. And those 2 lit up. That one was extremely dim, like you could barely see it. This one ended up being a pretty good brightness, but it was slowly fading down to nothing. And then when I was playing with it, I accidentally shorted something out and I fried them all. So I basically just cut all those LEDs out. But the thing is those were bonded in place with CA, and I didn't want to risk damaging anything on the front. So I basically just cut them off flush. And then I took 4 LEDs that I know are good because they're new in a little package of LEDs. And this is what I did. Probably one of my worst bodge jobs I've ever done. I basically just CA'd those 3 on top of the ones that I'd cut off flush, and just wired the switch down to the LEDs and over to this one. I've got about a 430 ohm resistor. 100 ohms was working fine, but they were way too bright. With a 100 ohm resistor, again, they were just way too bright. So I just upped the resistance value until I got something I liked. So if we plug in a battery here and just see what this looks like when we flip on the switch, I think it looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I think it looks better in person than on camera. Of course, you know, everybody says that about everything when they're not fully happy with what it looks like. But I don't know. I like it. I'm good with it. So, but yeah, this thing right here, like I said, this has taken so much more work than I expected. Here's the back side of the mechanism, the slides. And again, I put some 3-in-1 oil on those, and it makes it bind a lot easier, which is just weird. So I think I'm going to try, like I said, some just white lithium grease. And here's, you know, that one. It's just, I don't know. It's not what I was hoping for. It does work, but just not very well. So I'm going to play around with this some more. I'm done with this video for now. I'm going to wrap it up and call it done. But I'm going to eventually do some experimenting with the leather to see if I can get it to go back and cover up the slot better. Because right now that leather has no spring back. Once you push it out of the way, it just stays out of the way. So I have some ideas. I'll play with it later. I know I've said that like 3 times already. But anyways, and also I made the diameters of these so they would not hit each other, and those 2 are still hitting each other. And I think it's the lean. This one This one is leaning over. So I think if I take that loose from the shaft and flip the thing around, it'll lean over the other way, and then I think I'll be fine. Also, I Loctited those onto the threads, thinking that would lock them in place, but they're still loose. And that was like 2 days ago when I did that. So it still needs a little bit of tweaking. It still needs a little bit of fine-tuning, but this is it for now. And again, another reason why I don't like putting play features on a static display model. You know, this is going to go on display for people to look at. It's not meant for people to play with. So I think you should just put them in a position where they look good and leave them. But anyways, again, you can turn the lights on. That looks kind of cool, I guess. But this just goes, let me pop it in place here so you can see what it looks like. This just goes right in here. I'll have to make something to hold the battery a little bit better. And that just sits down in here like that. There's the lights on. And again, I'll get 3 screws here to hold it in place better. But yeah, I guess I'm happy with it. You know, it doesn't look terrible. But yeah, I'll put the handlebars on to get some pics for the thumbnail. But that's going to be it for this video. So as always, until next time, thanks for watching.